I've worn the Apple Watch Ultra 2 every single day for the past year, and I never thought I would go back to a regular Series watch ever again. But when Apple announced the Series 10 with that new 46mm display and that amazing jet black colorway, I was willing to give it a chance. So for the past 2 weeks, I've worn the Apple Watch Series 10 exclusively for everything, for workouts, for sleep tracking, for daily use, for phone calls, everything. And I have to admit, I've loved every minute of it, a lot more than the Series 9, because I tried the same experiment with the Series 9 and I did not last more than 3 days. So the Series 10 is amazing. I mean, it's way more comfortable than my Ultra 2. It just sits so much, different on my wrist. It's so sleek on my wrist. It doesn't snag on all of my clothes when I'm getting dressed, and the battery life isn't all too bad like I thought it would be. But despite the good, there are still some major issues that have me contemplating if I should even keep the Series 10 or just stick with my Apple Watch Ultra 2. So let's talk about it. So let's start with the most obvious difference aside from the $400 versus $800 price point, and that is the design. So as I mentioned, the Series 10 feels like a cloud on my wrist, whereas the Ultra 2 just feels like a watch. That's the best way I can describe it. The Series 10, I almost never feel it actually on my wrist. Most of the time it just kind of sits there and I don't really feel it. I'm not uncomfortable by it. But the Ultra 2, I always know it's there. Like I can always feel it on my wrist. It's the weight, it's just the size of it, the band, like everything about it. I can just always tell that it's there. The Series 10 is low profile. It sits super close to my wrist, which I wasn't used to. And sometimes I just forget that I'm wearing it, which never happens with the Ultra. I always know this thing is there, especially when sleeping with it. It's not uncomfortable for me, but I can always feel it. And sometimes I do have to lay a little bit different because I'll be laying on my watch wrong and it'll kind of push into my wrist, but I've never had that with the Series 10. It's just a much different fit. It's so much closer to the wrist and it's just so much more comfortable throughout the day. And that's because the Ultra 2 is nearly 70% heavier than the Apple Watch Series 10. And of course it's made of titanium, whereas the Series 10 is made out of aluminum. Also, the Series 10 is nearly 50% thinner than the Ultra 2, and it's the thinnest Apple Watch that Apple has ever made. But that's the whole point. The Series 10 is meant for your average everyday person. The Ultra 2 is not. And that's why it only comes in one size, and that's why it's so rugged, is because it's meant for extreme sports. It's meant for the outdoors. It's meant for hiking. It's meant for diving. It's meant for those things. That's not what the Series 10 is meant for, and that shows even just in the design. The Ultra 2 also has an action button on the side, which is something I use daily to quickly start a workout, so that was definitely missed when switching to the Series 10, but it wasn't the end of the world. It just took me a few extra taps. Now, also new with the Series 10 and the Ultra 2 is that you can play music and podcasts from the speakers on the watch itself. And surprisingly, the Apple Watch Series 10 with the redesigned speakers on the left-hand side, it gets extremely loud. Like it's almost just as loud as the Ultra 2. As a matter of fact, most people would not even be able to tell a difference between the sound of these two watches. But in my experience, just listening for any type of difference, the sound that comes from the Ultra 2 is a little bit more full. And you can tell that when you have them side by side, but it's pretty close. I mean, they're almost identical in terms of the sound from that speaker.
Time you actually start to communicate and think in that way more often, and then gradually those experiences are created.
The third chemical in dose is serotonin. This is the chemical responsible for our mood and our energy. And the most important...
However, the microphone on the Apple Watch Series 10 is better than the microphone on the Apple Watch Ultra 2. So if you take phone calls on your watch, like I do all the time, I've done that for years, it's much better on the Series 10 because we now have voice isolation, which will block out background noise. If you're in a supermarket, if you're grocery shopping, if you're outside with a bunch of kids screaming, you will be able to hear the person's voice. People will be able to hear my voice better when I'm talking on the Series 10 compared to the Ultra 2. So here's a little mini test with some background noise. So here's the test of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with some background noise, and we have the robot vacuum in the background. It's about 3 feet away from me right now, 4 feet away from me. And we're trying to see how the voice isolation is on the Ultra 2 compared to the Series 10. And then here's a test from the Apple Watch Series 10 with the robot vacuum in the background, same distance away. And we're trying to see how the voice isolation is compared to the Apple Watch Ultra 2, if it is any better at all. Hopefully it is. Now, as for the digital crown and the side button, there's also a massive difference here in size, especially since the Series 10's crown got slightly smaller this year, but honestly, there's really no difference in day-to-day usage. Like, I don't have any struggles with pressing the smaller digital crown or side button on the Series 10. And then the backplate is now metal on the Series 10, so this helped not only decrease the thickness, but this also allows for faster charging. Now, as for the display itself, we do have a 49mm display size on the Ultra versus a 46mm on the Series 10. However, the Series 10 does get 3% more active screen area compared to the Ultra 2, which is crazy, but that's thanks in part due to the new wide-angle LTPO3 display on the Series 10. But in real-world usage, there's honestly not that big of a difference, and I have to say that even though the active screen area is larger, like you could see more on the display of the Series 10 according to Apple, the Ultra 2 still seems like a larger display to me, but it's not because of the display itself, it's because of how propped up the watch sits on my wrist. Like, it's just kind of an illusion to our eyes, where since the Ultra 2 sits so much higher on my wrist, it's closer to my eyes, I can see that display better, and it just appears bigger to my eyes than at the Series 10. But for the 46mm Series 10 to even be comparable to the Ultra is a feat in itself. Now, there is one exclusive feature on the Series 10 that I will miss if I were to switch back over to the Ultra 2, and that is the 1 Hz refresh rate. And this allows you to see the seconds hand when you're in the always on display mode. So when your wrist is down, you'll be able to see the seconds hand ticking like a regular, like real watch, which is cool. And you do also get this extra little section here during your workouts that shows the milliseconds. And then also the visibility and brightness is better on the Apple Watch Series 10 at an angle. So if you look down at your wrist, you can see more of the watch face itself and the content on there. It's brighter and more visible than on the Ultra 2. It's really not that big of a difference in real world usage, but it is a big difference if you're coming from an older Apple Watch and you upgrade to the Series 10. But again, that's only at an angle. The Ultra 2 still gets 1,000 extra nits of brightness over the Apple Watch Series 10 with regular viewing. And I can tell a difference. Like here in Florida, under direct sunlight, I'm in that all the time, so I can tell a difference, and the Ultra 2 definitely gets brighter. And just looking at my watch face made me realize how much I have missed the modular Ultra watch face. That is an Apple Watch Ultra exclusive watch face, and it's the best watch face in my opinion for any Apple Watch. And the Apple Watch Series 10 does not have that, and that's why I've struggled for the past couple weeks to find a good watch face, and I really have not been able to find one even close to as good as modular Ultra. So that's a downside to the Series 10 and a big pro to the Ultra. Okay, so now we have to talk about the battery life, because this was, as expected, the biggest hurdle for me, going from the Ultra 2 to the Series 10. Like, it's a massive difference in battery life, and I knew going in that it was going to be the biggest challenge, and it was. So Apple claims 18 hours for the Series 10 and 36 hours for the Ultra 2. So that is double the battery life, and that is a massive difference when it's something that you rely on to track your sleep and track your metrics throughout the day. It changes how you use and think about a smartwatch on your wrist. And you have to keep in mind, I've been using the Ultra for 2 years now, like over 2 years since the first one came out. I've not used any other watch. So it's really hard to go from not having to even think about charging your watch every day to being forced to charge your watch every single day. Like, it seems like a small task, but just mentally processing that after having the muscle memory for 2 years of not even having to think about it was a big change for me. So for the Ultra 2, I would go at least probably 30-ish hours without having to charge, whereas on the Apple Watch Series 10, I have to charge at least once per day, at least once per 24 hours. So while that does seem bad, Apple has lightened the blow a little bit, because the Series 10 does charge faster than previous Apple Watches. So it charges from 0 to 80% in 30 minutes, but most importantly, only 8 minutes of charging gets you 8 hours of sleep tracking. And that right there has been the saving grace for me with this watch. And I say that because that's usually the only time I know when my battery life is getting low, is when it's getting close to bedtime and I get the alert that says you need to charge before bed. So that is very nice, because now every night before bed, I know that it needs charged. So I just put it on the charger and I do all my nightly activities. I get my shower, I brush my teeth, all that. And then by the time I come back to bed and my watch is sitting there, it's charged up enough to get at least through the night, which is nice. Now, I will say it took me a good week to, really come to terms with that and be okay with that after going so long without having to worry about it. But now it's not a problem at all for me. Now, speaking of sleep, obviously the Series 10 is going to be a lot more comfortable to sleep with. It's a night and day difference between the Ultra 2 and the Series 10. I probably don't need to tell you that. You probably can already tell that just from looking at the size. But yeah, the Series 10, it feels like an absolute cloud on my wrist when I sleep. However, it does come with a downside because I have to say that for the past 2 years that I've been wearing the Apple Watch Ultra to bed for sleep tracking, I think I've only ever missed my alarm, like the vibrating alarm on my wrist, maybe like 2 or 3 times total over the span of 2 years. But within the first 2 weeks of wearing the Apple Watch Series 10 to bed, I've already missed my alarm 1 time. And another time, I'm not going to count the second time because it was like as it was already going off, but it wasn't right away. And as far as I know, the haptic engine, the taptic engine inside of these watches is the same, but I think it's something about the surface area of the Apple Watch Ultra where the vibrations are just harder on my wrist and they wake me up better than on the Series 10. But every other night aside from that has been fine with the Series 10 on my wrist. Now I do also have to mention that sleep apnea detection is coming for both of these watches, so not one of them is going to have a benefit over the other. That's going to be a big deal when it releases, and it will be on the Series 10 and the Ultra 2. Now the Series 10 did also get the new S10 chip, so this is pretty much the same as the S9 chip in the Ultra 2. I haven't really been able to tell any difference whatsoever in terms of performance. If anything, I think the Ultra 2 is still better in some ways because for some reason the notifications come faster to my watch face than on the Series 10. Really weird change, but I don't think that's really super related to the chipset inside. There's also a new depth gauge on the Apple Watch Series 10, so it supports up to 20 feet of depth. So not quite the diving companion that the Ultra 2 is, but it's still nice to have, as is the water temperature sensor. So both of these have a water temperature sensor, so you can tell the temperature of the water during pool workouts. And speaking of workouts, this is where I miss the Apple Watch Ultra 2 the most by far, and let me give you a few reasons why. Number one, precision start. We don't have precision start on the Apple Watch Ultra 10. Big downside there. I have to worry about the battery life on my Series 10. I never had to worry about battery life on the Ultra 2 during a workout. I missed the action button because that's normally set to start my outdoor walk workout, whereas I had to manually go in and do that on my Series 10. I missed the brighter display because one time in the bright sunlight, I was not able to see my display as brightly as I would have liked to on the Series 10. And of course, if anything were to happen, not really where I'm at, but if I was in the mountains or something, I have the siren on the Ultra 2. I don't have any form of siren or any type of emergency signal on the Series 10. And again, the Series 10 is more comfortable on the wrist, but the Ultra 2 is superior in every other way when it comes to workouts, outdoor activities, sports, anything like that. And as somebody who loves to hike, there's no way I'm going back to Yosemite or the Rocky Mountains without the Apple Watch Ultra 2. There's no way I'm taking my Series 10 if I'm going hiking. The battery life wouldn't last. I wouldn't have that siren in case of emergency, especially during a hike. I wouldn't have the precision dual frequency GPS for better, tracking and better GPS. The display might not be bright enough or rugged enough. And also if I hit my watch on a rock, like if I fell and, banged my wrist against the rock, I wouldn't have to worry about the Ultra 2 breaking. Whereas the Series 10, that rock might just shatter that screen. Whereas I know the Ultra 2, after watching all those durability tests, I know that the Ultra 2 will survive pretty much anything I throw at it when it comes to accidental falls or anything like that. So even though the Apple Watch Series 10 is great, the Ultra 2 is just way too good of a companion when doing anything outdoors to ever even consider giving up. But if you're somebody who does mostly indoor exercise and indoor sports, you don't really do any type of hiking, any type of extreme sports, or really anything outdoorsy, then the Apple Watch Series 10 is an amazing watch. This thing is going to be perfect for your workouts. It might even be preferred over the Apple Watch Ultra 2 for your workouts if you do things indoors because of its comfort, because of the 1 Hz refresh rate. It has pretty much all the features that the Ultra 2 does besides those things that I just mentioned. But, if you're doing things indoors, if you're doing activities indoors, you probably won't even need the dual frequency GPS. You probably won't need the siren. You probably won't need these extra features like the super crazy durability. So the Series 10 looks like a great option for you if you're not somebody who does those extreme things that are meant for the Ultra. So with all that being said, I love the Apple Watch Series 10. I love the way it looks and the way it feels on my wrist. It's sleek, it's low profile, it never gets in the way, it has good battery life given the size, it charges up fast, it has nearly all the same features as the Ultra, and is much more comfortable to sleep with. So for those reasons, I will be keeping the Apple Watch Ultra 10 46mm jet black. I will be keeping this for sleep tracking and also for my daily usage, daily activities, maybe small workouts. I will keep the Series 10 for that and use it for that happily. But I will also be keeping my Apple Watch Ultra 2, which I did go out and buy the black version. I couldn't help myself. I had the regular Ultra 2, but I had to get the black version. But I will be keeping this as well for longer duration workouts, for anything related to outdoors, so whether that be sports, hiking, anything like that, and also for flights, for traveling, anything like that, any type of longer duration activity, I will be wearing the Apple Watch Ultra for. Anyways, hopefully my experience helped you understand the pros and the cons of the Apple Watch Series 10 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2. I didn't want to focus too much on specs. I wanted to talk more about real world, actual life usage. So hopefully that helped you out. And if it did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also be sure to subscribe because I will be doing a longer term review on both of these watches, because will I continue using both of them, on and off for different scenarios? We'll see. That's my plan for now, but we'll see how that goes. If you want to see an update in 6 months, a year, subscribe to the channel and I will bring you that video. But in the meantime, I do have a couple of videos right here that I think you will like. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.